Hey guys, it's me again, Amaz, and this time I'm gonna do another rant. And hopefully by the end of the video, I could have made my point on a group of Hearthstone cards, which are very different from the rest and what I think Hearthstone is supposed to be. But before that, I'm gonna preface this with a card that I made right here. Okay, it's called Bradley Thought the Sign. Okay, it's a 3-mana 3/2. Battle cry, deal 1 damage, so it's kind of like an Iron Forge Rifleman. But 50% of the time, you deal 4 damage instead. So if you look at this card, you go like, wow, this is the most terribly designed card ever, right? If it was ever a real card, you would riot, right? And I agree. This is a bad card because, you know, the effect sometimes is wildly crazy and it might determine games that are otherwise not determined. And in its least case, it does still deal 1 damage, so you're still getting something out of it, right? And in times of desperation, you can try and like 50% of the time win the game. So this is actually very similar to a card called Tuskarr Totemic that's in the game right now, right? It's a 3-mana 3/2 shaman card, and it summons a random totem that doesn't really care like what kind of totem you have on the board. So it's just like a 1 out of 7 possible choices you get when you play it. So why is this card so close to Bradley that I created? Well, in your normal case situation, you get one of the 4 basic totems, right? The basic hero powers from Shaman, and it's a 0/2 or a 1/1 or whatever, right? And it's fine, right? I mean, it's a 3/2 to summon another body. Like, I wouldn't call it spectacular or whatnot, but it's like, okay, like whatever, right? You can deal with it. However, the other half of the time, it's pretty much half, right? The other 3 out of 7 of the time, it summons something that's so completely breaking that it's not supposed to be even a 3-mana card, right? Like, it's a Manatide, okay? The Manatide draws a card. It's a 3/2 that replaces itself and also demands your opponent answers the 0/3 that it drops behind. Otherwise, it's just gonna keep drawing cards, right? Flame Tongue Totem, right? It just adds +2 power to your minions. So effectively, you're getting two mana minions from the cost of 1 card and 3 mana, right? And of course, everybody's favorite, Tuskarr Totemic summoning a Totem Golem, right? Which is like, just not even fair, right? 3/2 and a 3/4, that's like Dr. Boom levels of craziness, right? And why is this card so bad? Like, people just don't have the answers to something that summons a Totem Golem or something that summons a Manatide that early on in the game, right? At turn 3, you're not supposed to be facing that much amount of board state or, you know, just tempo, I guess. And the fact that, like, Shaman decks or even whatever decks, like the best decks in Hearthstone curve out, right? And if you can have something that goes above the curve, you just win the game, like on the spot. Like, you just win the game, and more on that later. Okay, I have more examples of cards like these. Fandral Staghelm is another card that's very similar to the I win kind of mentality, right? Fandral Staghelm itself doesn't do much, right? It just basically says that all your other choose win cards gain an additional effect. I kind of see it as like all your other cards have like inspire, right? It's like super powered, right? Now, the problem with Fandral is that when you play Fandral and then you cast like a Living Roots or like a Raven Idol, that's fine. You get like your card's worth of it. And if your opponent removes it, that's fine because it still did something, right? The problem arises when your opponent cannot deal with it, right? And then Fandral sits on the board and basically snowballs out of control. It's very similar to a card that's like Murloc Knight, right? Murloc Knight, if it stays on the board and it activates its effect again, it's not supposed to do that 2 times. It's only supposed to summon a Murloc the first time and your opponent's supposed to remove it. But there are actually a lot of games where when you play something, your opponent can't deal with it, right? And Fandral Staghelm coupled with Innervate, right? That's just crazy. Like, you're not supposed to use Fandral, Innervate, Power of the Wild at turn 4 ever, right? That's just like an ungodly amount of board state from nothing, right? Like, all it asks of you is to draw 3 cards together when you can play them separately and they all have their own power level anyways. It's just not something that's supposed to happen in turn 4. Okay. Next example, Animal Companion. Okay, imagine a situation where it's Hunter versus Druid, and I play Animal Companion at turn 3, and it's a Huffer. Okay? I deal 4 damage to your face, and then you remove it. So that's one of the examples. You took 4 damage, you still removed it, but I still dealt my 4 damage, right? The other choices are Misha and Leok, which is a minion that just stays there, a 4/4 taunt, or 2/4 raid leader, I guess, that just stays there and can't do anything. And then you use Swipe, right? Because, like, think of it this way. Swipe will always remove an Animal Companion. But Huffer makes it such that if you remove it, it already did something, right? It already did 4 damage to your face. So you're not actually getting punished by getting a Huffer, for example, right? Back then, Huffer might be bad because, you know, it gets punished by Heap of the Grove. It still gets punished by Backstab, SI, or whatever. But my point is that the most common games, when you get Huffer, your win percentage just shoots up. Because if they deal with it, it did the damage already. If they didn't deal with it, you still have a minion that's just good. Right? It's kind of just like a Misha. It's going to attack in for 4 damage, or like trade with a minion or whatnot. It's going to get double value, right? So the fact that 33% of the time when you play Animal Companion, you get such a big lead is like not okay, I think. My final example is Arcane Missiles and Flamewaker, right? A situation arises where you're playing against Zoo, you're playing Temple Mage, and they play Flame Imp, like 3-2, right? Throughout the years of Hearthstone, we already know that if you play Arcane Missiles on the board with just Flame Imp, it's a 50% to kill the Flame Imp, right? That's such a big swing, right? Like, if you cast Arcane Missiles, it's like you flip a coin, 50% of the time, you gain board, like, you deal with it, and 50% of the time, you're so screwed. You can't come back from behind, right? Like, these cards should not be so swingy, right? It's like, that's the problem with these Hearthstone cards, is that they're so good right now. Like, these cards are just good bang for the buck, right? Like, all the cards that I mentioned are just cards you will include. But the fact that they can just determine games on the spot is really, really problematic. So I grouped these cards in a group I called Accidental Victories, okay? So the definition of an Accidental Victory card is that this card can cause you to win the game immediately on the spot, okay? Like, if I play Tuskarr Totemic and it summons a Totem Golem, I have won the game, right? I have just won the game. I get a mana tag. I've just won the game from a 3 mana card. And they also don't cause you to lose if they don't do the effects, right? So example, like King's Elk, okay? It's a 2 mana 3/2, very fine, it's a beast. If you draw the card, wow, that's like, you're not supposed to be even do that. And if you miss, fine, you can go on with your life, right? Like, there's just like no risk to including these cards in your deck, right? And then when you combine all these Accidental Victory cards, you get something called a unstoppable combo, right? I just made that example of Fandral, Innervate, Power of the Wild. You see that in ladder all the time because that's just like, it's not supposed to happen that early on. And these, what does it require as a setup? It requires you to put all these 3 cards in your deck and draw them at the same time, which you will, right? There are those group of games where you just win automatically, right? Which is not okay because it's frustrating. It's frustrating to both players, right? If I play Tuskarr Totemic in my deck and I don't get a Mana Tide or a Totem Golem, I feel bad. When I do get it, my opponent feels bad. So why can't we just have a card that both players knows what they're getting, right? Like, these cards actually make 4 mana 7/7 look good. Because when you play a 4 mana 7/7, you know what you're getting. It's not 4 mana, randomly get a 1/1 to a 10/10. Right? You know that you are going to pay Overload 2, you know you're going to get a 7/7, and you know that it's going to stick on the board. It's not going to just do some random crazy stuff that both players don't know what's happening, right? So, like, my point is that you can make powerful cards that don't have RNG, right? Cairn, Tyrion, the Lotheb that was in Naxxramas, like, these are all powerful cards that don't have randomness or that can just win the game on the spot, right, immediately, which is good, right? Another example would be Corcoran Elite. Corcoran Elite is a 4 mana 4/3 that always has charge, 100%, right? It's not something like Animal Companion that 33% chance of the time it has charge, because like the power level of a card is it's so skewed. It's so skewed, right? I mean, just look back at Bradley, right? You would never imagine that Hearthstone would ever be a good game if Bradley is in the design space. It's just, I just don't think that's the spirit of Hearthstone, right? Because back then, when I played Hearthstone in vanilla, I get an enjoyment from predicting what my opponents play, right? So for example, my opponent is gonna play Despite, or my opponent is gonna play Belcher. So I'm just gonna play minions that don't have 1 health, or in the case of Belcher, I'm gonna play a 5 attack minion, such that if he does that, I can punish him, right? But right now, like, even though I know he's gonna play Tuskarr Totemic, or I know he's gonna play, like, Animal Companion, I can't do anything about it, right? Like, if they roll in such a scenario that is advantageous for them, like, I don't have an answer. I can't go like, oh wow, I'm really glad I saved this Wrath so that I can deal with Huffer. Like, that doesn't ever come up. It's like, oh god, I have to remove this Huffer with the Wrath. I don't have a choice, right? And another problem is that even my opponent doesn't know, right? Like, how can I outplay my opponent when my opponent doesn't even know what the heck they're gonna do, right? Like, they don't know what's gonna come off Tuskarr Totemic. They don't know what's gonna happen when they play Yogg-Saron, right? Sometimes, most of the times, it clears the board, but sometimes it just gives them, like, insane card advantage, insane board and whatnot. Like, it's not possible, right? And it doesn't even, like, the sense of me winning a game and getting a victory is not as satisfying when my opponent plays Yogg and the game is determined by that, right? Or my opponent plays, like, the Tuskarr Totemic and gets a mana tag. Like, I just don't feel like the enjoyment is there, the satisfaction of I really outplayed my opponent, right? Another good example is, like, if you throw me right now in a tournament with 7 other guys that are just the best Hearthstone players in the world, you bet your ass I'm gonna pick every single RNG deck. I'm gonna pick Tuskarr Totemic, I'm gonna pick Yogg-Saron, I'm gonna pick everything. Because, like, I know that I'm not as skilled as them, right? I can obviously name 7 players that are better than me in Hearthstone. It's very simple. Like, those guys just play so much, they're really good, okay? But the point is, if I can't beat them in a skill game, and I do have, like, RNG options that are available to me, like, I'm gonna play them, right? Because that gives me the biggest percentage to win, right? On the flip side, if you're a professional player and you're really skillful with the game, you really put a lot of time in it, you get punished. Because, yeah, you could randomly lose games to Tuskarr Totemic. If so happens that's the game, right? It happens, theoretically, 3 out of every 7 games, you can play against a Shaman that's playing Tuskarr Totemic. And that is the most frustrating thing ever right now, at least in Hearthstone, right? Like, the card design shouldn't be like that. We don't need that many RNG elements. I understand why there has to be an RNG element, because, well, first of all, it makes games more fun, and secondly, it makes design more fluid, right? Like, if Tuskarr Totemic says, you know, choose a totem to summon, you have to make a new UI, the card is more complicated, it requires more key presses, which is actually a very important thing. Like, partly why Hearthstone is so successful is because all the cards are very simple, and they only have one-dimensional effects, right? This card does this effect, and that's it, right? When you compare it to other Magic games, when you compare it to other card games like Magic, or like Yu-Gi-Oh, or like Pokemon, every card can do so many things, right? And, yeah, the draw of Hearthstone is that every card is very unique, and they stand out. Like, Sylvanas is always going to steal something, and she doesn't do anything else, right? Like, you know, Tyrion is, like, already on the top echelon of design complexity, and it gives you an Ashbringer, right? Like, at the end of the day, it just gives you Ashbringer as a big defensive body. Like, it makes sense. But now, it's suffering because, like, the only way to make complex cards is to tie RNG in them, right? Like, Shredder, right? Pile Shredder is a good example, right? That is a complex card. But, like, why does it have to be like that, right? Why can't good cards be like the examples like Karen and Lotheb, right? Why do they always have to be wildly, like, determine the outcome on the spot? Like, I don't want to see any more Tuskarr Totemics, any more Fandro Stag Helms, and I don't even... I wish that they could get rid of Animal Companion because it's in standard. It's gonna be here in the game forever, right? Like, I don't want to play against the Huffer anymore. That does not make the game fun for me and enjoyable. as a player, as a competitive player. I just don't enjoy it as like a as like a Hearthstone player. So like I really hope that the next expansion we don't get that thing. Like Dr. Boom is another good example, right? I don't want cards that deal 1 to 4 damage. I don't want Crackle, cards that deal 3 to 6 damage. I don't want any of those anymore. Make cool RNG cards, right? That don't that aren't such swing cards, because otherwise, like, I can just make Bradley, and then we can pair with Bradleys all day, and that is not what I want Hearthstone to be. So yeah, that's my rant for today. Like, I just thought of another topic right now. It's like 0 mana cards, right? Like Fandral is only so OP because it has Innervate, right? But like my next rant is gonna be on 0 mana cards. Yeah, that's actually perfect. But yeah, hope you guys you know, enjoy this rant, and you know it jogs your brain up for something. I don't know. I just want to get this out of my system mainly, actually. So yeah, thanks for listening. I'll see you in the next video.